Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the 7th studio release from the English rock band Kasabian titled The Alchemists Euphoria. This is the first album the band have released since the departure of longtime frontman Tom Mayen. We do see Serge the guitarist picking up on the vocal duties, something that can often be the death of a band, the loss of that longtime frontman and how someone will come in to fill their shoes. With Kasabian though, Serge has always been the primary songwriter as well as the guitarist, always providing a lot of the songs that we know and love them for. And because of this, it makes it a lot easier for him to fit into that frontman role. Now, one difficulty the band are going to face with this change is Tom was definitely this rabble-rousing frontman. He was great at getting live crowds fired up, getting them joining along. And Serge doesn't really have that same kind of appeal, so that's going to affect their live performances. But in terms of actually songwriting and producing albums, we are going to see the band returning to what they do best, if not better, on this album. It is in some way a concept album all about the alchemist's journey, finding that moment of euphoria, searching for that surge of inspiration. It is also going to feature a lot of different ways in which you can find inspiration, kind of having that out-of-body experience, looking inwards, very reflective. Lots of different themes really being thrown around on this particular album, which we will see as we move through it. We'll also see the band toying with lots and lots of different sounds. They've always gone for that psychedelic rock, indie rock, or they kind of meshed together lots of different genres over the years, including elements of hip-hop, and this album is certainly no exception. There's so many different styles crammed in. They've really tried to explore and expand their horizons going forward. So will this album leave us in a state of euphoria or just leave us feeling a little bit disappointed? Let's take a look at it track by track. Opening the album, we do have the song Alchemist. This opens with a very nice, soft sound of the sea ebbing and flowing in and out. Often you do see it in many programs and films. People will use the beach and the sound of the waves as a calming influence, as a chance just to kind of really reflect and break things down. And that's what this song uses that effect for. We've also got this very subtle effect over the vocals, giving it that very 1960s kind of radio feel, and definitely kind of reflecting back on the past, taking a look back at previous works of the band. This could be a signal towards the departure of Tom. We've even got some of the lyrics suggesting that shut the door on your way if you're leaving. So that could be referencing to him leaving the band. It could be talking about fans that have stayed with Tom, because I know they've been very divisive about Serge taking over on vocals. So this song's a kind of way of opening the album saying, look, we are going to be a little bit different. We've just lost our long-time frontman, but stick with us for the ride. Or if you want to go, just leave and make sure you shut the door on your way out. We also get this really nice slow build into the album. I love their use of piano on this album. They really have used it to its full effect in a variety of different songs. And we're going to get to see this used to add just some really nice slow builds to various different songs on the album. And I like when they do that, just easing us in on this first track, just to give us an idea of where the band is going to be taking us. Then we do take a bit of a turn onto scripture. We've got this big beat, very bassy, aggressive, in-your-face kind of sounds really opening this track. And this song does bring us into the present. We've got the lyric, and reach for the mic as I walk from the shadow. The idea that Serge has been in that background role the entire time and now his time to shine has come. This is almost like an acknowledgement track of just this is the band's current state, whereas Alchemist was much more reflective of the band's past state. We do also have a very broken up track in this where it does delve occasionally into soft piano driven, almost hypnotic sounds with a very frantic violin thrown in on top. We're getting a lot of variety even though we're only 2 tracks in. It does really work just as a track that really helps bring you into the present and what the band is currently looking to do on this album after the reflection of Alchemist. For track 3, we do have one of the most annoying tracks on this album, and I'll explain a little bit why. Rocket Fuel. This has a very harsh, very springy sound to it. It's very repetitive on the ears, which can make it extremely annoying at times. But on the other flip side, it's also very infectious. After the first time I heard this album, as much as there's some great tracks, I was going around the house just singing the Rocket Fuel. Even though I couldn't stand the song, it sticks in your brain like crazy. You have got this very blaring sound on the ears. It is, as I say, very repetitive. It's just the constant, I'm your rocket fuel, I'm your rocket fuel, I'm your... And it's just drilled into you. And sometimes it kind of reflects the idea of sometimes to find that euphoric moment, you've got to tackle the same thing over and over. It's that repetition, that fact that sometimes you can do the same thing over and over and over until eventually you do have a breakthrough. So I think they've kind of explored that idea with this track. Although it's only very subtle, it does kind of come out, and it's the song that definitely will stick with you probably most after the first playthrough, or after you've heard it a couple of times. Even if you do find it annoying like I do, it'll be the song that is stuck in your head. Then we have the much more laid back, strictly old school. Now this is referencing to the idea of some bands doing some things different, kind of being pioneers. We've got the lyrics, you're Dr. Dre, you're Frida, and you're Kurt, referencing some people that went outside the box, tried to do things slightly differently at the time when they first got going, and then they've gone on to become these really big icons that we look up to over the years to come. So that's maybe something the band want to hint at. They want to hint at, yeah, they're going for something a little bit different on this album. They're trying to expand their horizons in the hope that it's going to be something that they can look back on in 5 to 10 years, and it's just really to prove to be a big success. And I like the constant changing of styles we've got. We're going from aggressive tracks to slightly softer. We've also got the use of different instruments to drive each song. Some very guitar driven, some of them more piano driven. I like the use of the piano to drive some of these songs. This one is more so guitar driven, giving it a very old school kind of feel, just making use of the acoustic guitar, just kind of stripping it back a little bit as well, which I do like to see. Many songs in the 90s were very guitar driven when you had the likes of Oasis and bands like that, so they're kind of referencing that through the use of this track. And we do also have the very subtle use of various different instruments just thrown in at different points in the song, really just adding those small little effects that just kind of give a little bit more flair to this track. It could be a nod to kind of some of the instruments that you would see occasionally pop up in 90s, early 2000s music as well. Just really trying to throw in a lot of different elements to this song, but just to stop it from being just a flat, boring song, they add these little peaks, these little small things that just give it a little bit of flair and give it a little bit of life. Then we've got the track Alligator, makes heavy use of synthesized vocals, very guitar driven as well. We have got some really nice riffs in these particular tracks where they do make heavy use of the guitar. And for the first half of the album, we've been keeping it very much very piano driven, very guitar driven as well. We've also kept it very short, very punchy and quite sharp at times. A lot of these big bassy sounds, everything's very short in its nature. We're kind of avoiding these long drawn out notes, anything like that. And there is going to be a reason for that, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But just the first half of the album certainly has everything kind of compressed, kept everything very short. This song does also include a very catchy chorus. It was definitely one of the more memorable ones that Serge has written for this particular album. It makes that use of dancing through different styles throughout the entire song. They do love to do this in a song. They love to just switch it up, making very heavy use of their different types of genres they do like to explore, from the psychedelic side to the indie to something a bit more piano driven. Then we head into the first interlude of 2 for this album in the form of Space. Going to see a lot of ebbing and flowing, kind of lots of use of synthetic sounds, just setting us up for what is to come over the next few songs. And this Space trio does start off with The Wall. Makes use of lots of distant sounds, kind of very hollow vocals as well, which I love because it gives the effect of a vast open space. This is the out-of-body experience part of the concept album I was talking about earlier. This is the very much reflecting down. It's almost like an astronaut looking at the pale blue dot in the kind of space sky effectively, and really just having that out-of-body experience. But I love the change up. We've gone from these short sounds. You'll see a lot of the notes being drawn out very heavily, or lots of spacing in between notes, just to create that kind of hollow effect. You're in space, you're being immersed into this area, and it's really showing that through the use of the instrumentation, which is very, very clever. Then we've got the track TUE, or the Ultraview Effect in parentheses. Now this is another song, very drawn out vocal notes with heavy use of synth. We've also got the very heavy use of distortion on the guitars as well, which just is another element that you can really add. That gives it a bit more pace to this track, and it's something that they've used through the guitar. We've had a very soft kind of style with The Wall, used bringing that guitar in, still keeping that idea of that distortion, that outer worldly sound which they like to incorporate into these tracks. As well as seeing a lot more layering on this, they really do have a lot more overlapping sounds just to create a really nice soundscape, very atmospheric track, and I really did enjoy this. It's probably one of the stronger tracks I did feel was on this album. Creates that sense of almost like you're floating in space, you're just outside of a space station, just floating around, just taking everything in. Then rounding out our trilogy trip to space, we do have Stargazer, very aptly named. We're continuing looking at different elements of space, and it's very much a club track. This is more of a coming back down to earth kind of track. Has a very heavy bass, very soft vocals. It's kind of, you're not floating in that nothingness now, you're come crashing down, you're coming through the atmosphere, very big sounds, very heavy sounds, almost like you've gone from that moment of peace to that moment of just pure chaos, of just kind of slightly more fearful effectively. And that's what they've done with this. It kind of has a very big build as well, something that like you'd see very like an opera do, or classical music, an orchestra. They'll have these slow builds into this moment of explosion at the end, and that's what they want to do with this track. And they have done that through the clever use of the instrumentation, using this very big build, creating that moment of wanderlust as well with the music, and just kind of adding that clubby element to it to kind of give a bit more of a worldly feel. Now that we have returned to Earth, we're going to head into the track Chemicals. Now this is probably one of the strongest tracks on the album. I really did enjoy some of the little tricks they did for this. We've been returned to Earth, we're avoiding a lot of those synthy sounds that are still scattered throughout the track, but there's one thing I love they do with the drum pattern on this. I love, well, actually two things. First of all, the use of an almost drum and bass-esque undertone with the drums, especially in the chorus. It starts off in the verses with just a much more slow pace, keeping to that drum and bass effectively rhythm, but then when we hit the chorus it picks up, and I like they've done this because you could effectively go for a much more clubby feel with this track, but what they've done is they've used the drum and bass to keep to their rock roots, to keep to that rock element, and it adds the pace, adds the velocity to the song without kind of throwing too far away from their roots and delving too much into the psychedelic kind of sound. One of the clever tricks they really do on this track as well is just after one of the verses they have this drop in pace all of a sudden, and they make use of the kick drum and just the bass to create the idea of a heartbeat, and that actually ties in beautifully with the lyrics. This is the sound of your heart beating out of your chest, and just using just those two instruments, it gives you that idea that you're maybe in a club or a pub or something like that at 3 a.m. in the morning, and that's all you can hear. And sometimes people do have these euphoric moments on something like a night out. I mean, if you look at Underworld's Born Slippy, one of the most iconic dance tracks of its time, that was actually the idea for that song was conceived on a night out. So sometimes these moments of euphoria can come at the strike at any time. Sometimes it's that out of body experience, sometimes it's that calm reflective time by the ocean, and sometimes it's just when you're absolutely smashed off your face at 3 a.m. in the morning. But these two drum tricks really do add to the power of this track, and I think it's why it's one of the strongest. It is very catchy, it's a great sing-along track that people can easily listen to, a very catchy chorus as well, and I think it's just, this is the full package on this. It does include some slight electronic element, but does delve more towards the rock side of their sound. Then after our crazy night out with Chemicals, we do return to a much softer outro. We have the second interlude in the form of Sea, and we are making a return trip to the beach just to kind of check out the ocean one last time in track Letting Go. It does open and end with the sound of the sea. Again, just adding to that reflective, it's almost like a journey start to end, re-envisioning a story or something like that. And it does also add a very nice outro to the album, which I always do love. I always do love those soft outros on albums. Overall, I do feel this has been a very strong showing for Serge as a frontman for the band. Now, him and Tom never have had the strongest of vocals. It's something that the band still continue, but I think they make up with that with their songwriting, with the use of their instruments, and including so many different elements and so many different niche instruments and sounds, and playing with so many different styles, and that has worked very strongly on this album. There are a couple of songs that just maybe don't quite hit the mark, or can be a little bit annoying, or just don't quite sit all together too well, but I like how they've broken the album up into kind of a couple of different sections just to kind of keep those different styles apart rather than mashing them all together and leaving you not knowing exactly where you're at. And I like that use of just that exploration and trying to look at different ways of exploring that, finding that moment of euphoria. So as a concept, it really does work very well, and it's almost like this blending of different ideas. I think overall though, I'm going to have to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I really did enjoy this album. There are a couple of tracks that really just do really great on me. Rocket Fuel, whilst can be a good track, and I like the concept they've gone for with that track, it's overly infectiously annoying for me, and I just couldn't quite get behind it. I do love the kind of the space element, and I am quite excited to see what else they can kind of go on to produce. I don't think their live performances are going to be as strong without Tom, but it'll be interesting to see whether Serge has been able to channel his inner Iggy Pop. That's who he's actually been trying to learn from for live performances, to kind of up his game in that regard. And I do think this is definitely a strong album that has a lot of potential, and certainly is one of the standouts that they have released over recent years. But as always, I would love to know your thoughts on this album. Do you enjoy different sections? Is there a section you enjoy, section you don't? What's your favourite track? I think for me, Chemicals is a real standout. I really did enjoy that track. It just felt like the full package on this album. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and if you want to see more content like this, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.